What if someone tried to steal from you right under your nose, thinking you'd never fight back? That's what my HOA did when they illegally drilled for oil on my land. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I'd stay quiet. So I gave them exactly what they deserved and cemented every single hole shut. I still remember that fateful morning when I discovered the first signs of the betrayal. As I walked out to check on my crops in the chill of dawn, I noticed an unusual glint in the soil, a slight shimmer that didn't belong in the peaceful, well-tended fields I'd spent years nurturing. My heart sank as I crept closer, only to see deep, jagged holes scattered across a swath of my land. There was no mistaking it. Someone had been drilling. And not just for any reason. These holes were in all the wrong places, right where I'd never expected an oil rig to be set up. I felt a mix of disbelief and simmering anger. Who could dare invade my land in such a callous manner? As the reality set in, I remembered the constant headaches and petty fines the HOA had been handing out over minor infractions. But this was different. It was theft on a massive scale, a violation of my property rights that went far beyond a rogue snow sculpture or an unauthorized fence. This was about exploiting my land for profit without even asking. The sound of my own footsteps on the gravel, the rustle of the wind through the trees, and the distant hum of an industrial drill all merged into a deafening silence of betrayal. I knew right then that if I didn't act, nothing would ever change. So out of the only thing I could think of, I decided to shut down every last drill hole. I was going to cement them over, one by one, sealing the invasive scars out of my land and sending a clear message that I wouldn't tolerate any further abuse. That's when I fired up my cement mixer, rolled up my sleeves, and prepared for a battle that would prove that property rights and dignity aren't negotiable. My land, known to the locals as Green Pastures Farm, had been in my family for generations, a patch of earth steeped in history, hard work, and love. Nestled on the outskirts of a small town, the farm sprawled over 150 acres, with fields of golden wheat, vibrant vegetable patches, and orchards that told stories of summers past. I had built this place with my own two hands, learning the secrets of the soil from my father and his father before him. It was more than property, it was my heritage. For as long as I could remember, I had practiced sustainable farming, always respecting the natural rhythms of the seasons. I invested in modern technology when necessary, a state-of-the-art irrigation system here, a solar panel array there, but I never lost sight of the importance of living in harmony with the land. It was a labor of love that provided not only for my family, but also for our community as I sold fresh produce at the local farmers market. My humble farm stand was a symbol of independence and local pride. But not everyone shared that vision. The local homeowners association, a powerful group that prided itself on order and conformity, had always regarded me as something of a rebellious spirit. They would frequently fine me for unauthorized modifications or aesthetic disruptions on my property, trivial matters that I simply couldn't abide by in a world that valued creativity over uniformity. At the helm of this enforcement machine was Karen Simmons, better known as HOA Karen. With her perfectly pressed suits, clipboard, and an unyielding gaze, she trotted around the neighborhood as if every stray blade of grass was a potential scandal waiting to be exposed. Karen's obsession with order left little room for individuality. To her, every property had to conform to a pre-approved standard, a rigid template that stifled any hint of creative expression. While many of my neighbors acquiesced to her heavy-handed rules, I always saw them as a stifling, bureaucratic nightmare. I value my freedom. I believe that true progress could only come when you were willing to defy convention, to fight for your own rights, and to innovate without fear of retribution. It was this mindset that had fueled my passion for farming and had driven me to experiment with new, sustainable methods. My land was my canvas, and every acre was tended with care and ingenuity. I was proud to cultivate a diverse array of crops and to run my farm on my own terms. But then, one day, without warning or consent, the HOA, led by Karen, crossed a line I could not ignore. They illegally drilled for oil on my land. I discovered it one chilly morning when I noticed deep, jagged holes punctuating the once fertile soil. The drilling was not part of any approved project. It was a brazen exploitation of my land's natural resources. The evidence was undeniable. There were tracks in the mud, remnants of drilling equipment, and even faint traces of oil. It was an act of corporate vandalism disguised as a bureaucratic decision, a move designed to strip my land of its value for profit, all under the watchful eye of an HOA that claimed to protect community standards. That discovery shattered my sense of security. My farm, my legacy, was under attack by the very people who were supposed to protect the community. And as the details unfolded, I realized that I had to fight back with every legal, creative, and determined fiber in my being. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge the very principles of property rights and community governance. The first signs of the illicit drilling came from a series of mysterious phone calls and local whispers. Neighbors mentioned strange noises in the dead of night, rumblings that didn't belong to the normal chorus of crickets and rustling leaves. At first, I dismissed it as the wind or perhaps a stray animal, but then I noticed the deep scars in my soil. I began to investigate, carefully combing through the land for any signs of disturbance, and what I uncovered was nothing short of infuriating. I found remnants of drilling equipment hidden among the crops and deep oil stains seeping into the ground like a parasite. With mounting anger, I returned to my old security footage and discovered that, late one night, a series of heavy vehicles had entered my property under the cover of darkness. Timestamps, tire tracks, and even the vehicle's registration hinted at unauthorized activity, an operation that had been quietly extracting resources from my farm. And all the while, the HOA board had either been ignorant of or complicit in the act. It wasn't long before I pieced together the scandal. Karen Simmons had spearheaded an initiative to modernize community resources by allowing drilling for oil on certain plots. But in a cruel twist of fate, they chose my land, the very soil I'd nurtured for generations, as a test site for their venture. It was a blatant attack on my property rights, executed under the guise of profit and progress, but driven by greed and bureaucratic overreach. Furious at the injustice, I began compiling every bit of evidence I could find. I salvaged data from my security cameras, took soil samples for testing, and reached out to a local environmental consultant who confirmed that the drilling had caused significant contamination. My digital dossier grew rapidly, a collection of damning images, videos, and expert opinions that laid bare the truth of what was happening on my land. But evidence alone would not suffice. I knew that Karen's misdeed was the tip of the iceberg and that a strong, decisive reaction was needed to send a message. I decided that I would not let my property be exploited without a fight. I resolved to take action in the only way that made sense for me. I was going to cement every single drill hole shut. Every hole that had been dug into my land would be filled, sealed with concrete, so that not a trace of that insidious intrusion would remain. I contacted a trusted contractor and arranged for a full day of work. Under the watchful eye of my own security cameras, crews arrived with mixers, shovels, and tons of concrete. Together, we worked feverishly, filling every hole with precise, deliberate strokes. The sound of hammers and mixers, the gritty scent of cement, and the sight of earth being reclaimed all served as a cathartic counterattack against the violation of my land. Each filled hole was an act of retribution and a declaration. This is my property, and no one, not even the HOA, can take that from me. As word of my actions spread through the community, support began to pour in. Neighbors expressed their admiration for my refusal to be silenced. Online posts and hashtags like #LandReclaimed and #NoLittleBleeing began trending. The digital dossier of the drilling scandal, once a tool of documentation, now served as a rallying cry, proof that when you stand up for your rights, nature and justice will prevail. Yet, the conflict was far from resolved. Karen Simmons and the HOA board argued that the drilling was part of a broader, approved plan for community resource management. They claimed that oil extraction was vital for generating revenue to maintain the community. But the more they tried to justify it, the more my evidence contradicted their narrative. I attended board meetings, presenting documents, soil tests, and detailed maps of the affected areas. I argued passionately that my land had been exploited illegally, and that by cementing over those drill holes, I was not only protecting my legacy, but also sending a clear message to every resident that property rights were inviolable. Late one cold evening, as I reviewed the final reports from the environmental consultant, I received a call from a longtime neighbor. "You did the right thing," he assured me. "We've all seen what the HOA has been up to, and your actions have opened our eyes. They can't just take our land without our say." His words resonated with the countless others who had suffered under arbitrary enforcement, fueling my determination to see this battle through. The stage was set for a showdown that would shake the foundations of Crescent Meadows. I knew that by the time the final public hearing arrived, my digital dossier, filled with undeniable evidence and the voices of the community, would force a reckoning. The days ahead would be a test of both my resolve and the strength of our collective demand for justice. In the wake of my bold, decisive action, the ripple effects spread rapidly through Crescent Meadows. Social media platforms exploded with posts documenting every filled drill hole, every snapshot of the freshly cemented ground replacing those invasive scars. Hashtags such as #LandReclaimed, #StopTheDrill, and #NoMoreHBullying became rallying cries as neighbors, inspired by my determination, began sharing their own experiences of arbitrary HOA overreach. Local news outlets picked up the story, and soon reporters were seen outside my property, capturing interviews with shocked residents who recounted how the drilling had disrupted the natural beauty of the community. One reporter, standing before a newly filled section of my field, said, "It's a clear message that private property rights are not for sale. When the HOA tried to exploit this land for profit, they got more than they bargained for." The narrative quickly evolved from a personal dispute into a broader debate on the limits of HOA power and the sanctity of land ownership. Within the HOA board itself, internal tensions reached a boiling point. Emergency meetings were convened in secret, and leaked minutes revealed deep divisions among board members. Some staunchly defended the oil drilling as part of a progressive, revenue-generating initiative, while others, swayed by the mounting public outrage and the irrefutable digital evidence, began to question whether Karen Simmons had overstepped her bounds yet again. "We must protect our residents' rights at all costs," one board member was overheard saying, "or else we risk turning Crescent Meadows into a controlled, soulless community." The dissension was palpable, and as the digital dossier continued to swell, it became clear that the board was losing the battle for public trust. I redoubled my efforts online. Each morning, I posted updates on my community forum, sharing before and after photos of the cement-filled drill holes alongside testimonies from environmental experts and neighbors who witnessed the drilling. My blog detailed every step of my counterattack, from the discovery of the illicit drilling to the painstaking process of filling each hole. The digital movement gained momentum. Hashtags trended, petitions were launched, and soon, the collective voice of Crescent Meadows was a deafening demand for accountability. Karen Simmons, meanwhile, was under fire. Her social media accounts, once brimming with images of perfectly manicured lawns and spotless community events, now featured frantic videos of her denouncing the vandalism committed by the farm owner. In one tearful video, she claimed that the drilling was essential for community prosperity and that my actions were unacceptable acts of defiance. But every claim was swiftly countered by the undeniable evidence. Timestamp footage, detailed maps of the affected areas, and expert reports confirming that the drilling had been both unauthorized and damaging to the environment. Local public safety officials issued statements reinforcing the legality of my actions. "Every homeowner has the right to defend their property from unauthorized intrusions," stated a spokesperson from the county assessor's office. "The evidence clearly shows that the drilling was conducted in violation of state property rights, and the remedial action taken was fully within the bounds of the law." These official endorsements further isolated Karen's narrative and bolstered the digital campaign that was rapidly sweeping Crescent Meadows. The tension reached its apex when the HOA board announced a final public hearing to address the drilling scandal and the subsequent actions taken by the aggrieved property owner. In the days leading up to the hearing, community meetings were held in local schools, churches, and even on front lawns, as residents organized to ensure their voices would be heard. Flyers were distributed, and online petitions gathered tens of thousands of signatures. The movement was no longer about one incident. It was a clarion call for a fundamental rethinking of how property rights and individual freedoms were respected in Crescent Meadows. On the morning of the hearing, the atmosphere in the community center was electric. Residents packed the assembly hall, many clutching evidence printouts and their smartphones as they prepared to witness the long-overdue showdown between an overreaching HOA and a community determined to reclaim its autonomy. Every shared video clip, every supportive comment online reaffirmed the message. When you try to exploit someone's land, the community will fight back. As the final hours ticked down, I could feel the weight of the struggle in every whispered conversation. The board's decision in the forthcoming hearing would set a precedent for how these matters were handled in the future. It was not just about cement and drill holes. It was about the right to live freely, to protect the natural beauty of one's home, and to challenge the unchecked power of an HOA that had lost its way. The decisive moment arrived on a crisp morning in a packed boardroom at the Crescent Meadows Community Center. The room was filled with a mix of HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and hundreds of resolute residents, all gather for the final public hearing to determine the future of property rights in our community. With a calm yet commanding presence, Councilwoman Elena Rodriguez stepped up to the podium, her gaze steady as it swept across the expectant faces before her. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, including time-stamped security footage, detailed maps of unauthorized drill sites, and expert testimonies, our findings are unequivocal. Councilwoman Rodriguez began, her voice ringing with authority. It is abundantly clear that the recent drilling conducted on private property, which was orchestrated under the auspices of our HOA, violated the fundamental rights of property ownership and was carried out without the consent of the landowner. Our community's resources are not for exploitation, and the abuses of power demonstrated in this case are unacceptable. A heavy silence settled over the room as Rodriguez continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all measures supporting the unauthorized drilling and will initiate a full disciplinary review of the actions that led to this violation. Furthermore, we will establish new protocols to ensure that property rights and environmental integrity are upheld for every resident of Crescent Meadows. Today's decision is not merely a reversal of past actions. It is a resounding affirmation that we will protect our homes and our lands from any further infringement. Her declaration was met with a swell of approval from the crowd. At that moment, a respected community advocate, renowned for his unwavering defense of individual freedoms, rose to speak. "Today we stand united as one," he proclaimed, his voice strong and impassioned. "No one should ever be allowed to exploit or harm someone else's property in the name of progress or profit. Let this vote be the turning point, a clear signal that Crescent Meadows will no longer tolerate the abuse of power for personal gain. We demand accountability, and we insist that every violation of our rights must be met with swift, decisive action." Thunderous applause erupted, echoing the determination of every person present. Following the advocate's powerful address, a senior environmental expert from the county presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all evidence, including expert soil tests that verified contamination from oil drilling, detailed security footage, and comprehensive maps of the unauthorized drill holes. The evidence was irrefutable. The drilling had been conducted without proper authorization, and every hole was a wound on the sanctity of private ownership. The Internal Affairs panel had unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures, and the full report was slated for immediate public release. Councilwoman Rodriguez concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Crescent Meadows, a community where every homeowner's rights and our natural resources are inviolable. Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will protect our lands, our environment, and the fundamental freedoms that define us. Together, we stand for justice, accountability, and the inalienable right to live free from exploitation. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our struggle for property rights and environmental justice. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Crescent Meadows. The days of arbitrary drilling and unchecked exploitation were over. A future built on respect for individual property and environmental integrity was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Crescent Meadows experienced a profound transformation. News of the rescinded sanctions and the sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and social networks, igniting fervent debates about property rights, environmental stewardship, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, emblazoned with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Crescent Meadows" and "Community United for Justice," celebrated the decisive actions taken to safeguard the rights of every homeowner and to protect our natural resources from further exploitation. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #StopTheDrill, and #GreenMeadows trended widely, reaffirming our collective determination to stand against any form of bureaucratic overreach. Town hall meetings and community forums saw unprecedented attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and to envision a future where local creativity and individual rights were cherished rather than suppressed. Neighbors who had long endured the detrimental effects of arbitrary policies now spoke openly of their right to manage their own property on their own terms. Our land is not a commodity for others to exploit. It is our heritage, one passionate resident declared at a bustling meeting, his voice echoing through the crowded hall. The atmosphere was charged with hope, a promise that Crescent Meadows would continue to evolve into a community that celebrated both innovation and tradition. Within the reformed HOA board and local regulatory agencies, swift measures were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, initiated comprehensive training programs on ethical governance, property law, and environmental conservation. Regular internal audits and clear, transparent disciplinary procedures were introduced to ensure that every complaint was rigorously reviewed and that no resident would ever again suffer from arbitrary fines or invasive policies. Our duty is to protect not only the rights of our residents, but also the integrity of our environment, Lieutenant Reed affirmed during a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our collective commitment to justice and sustainability. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized to further empower residents. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were organized to raise awareness about property rights, local environmental law, and the importance of community engagement in governing our shared spaces. When we unite, our voices have the power to reshape even the most entrenched systems, a local activist declared at a town hall meeting, inspiring residents to take pride in their heritage and to demand the respect they deserved. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and transformative. My decision to retaliate against the HOA's unauthorized drilling, not only by sealing every illicit drill hole with concrete, but also by forcing a public reckoning through my digital dossier, had reclaimed not only my land, but also the principle that no one can exploit my heritage for profit. The digital evidence that exposed the drilling scandal became a rallying cry, uniting neighbors who had long felt powerless under arbitrary rules. Our fight became larger than any single incident. It was a stand for the protection of our environment, our property rights, and our dignity. Karen Simmons, once the imperious enforcer of the HOA, was now reduced to a cautionary tale. a reminder that unchecked power and corporate greed have no place in a community that values individual freedom and environmental stewardship. Her previous transgressions were laid bare for all to see, and her influence waned as the community rallied behind the undeniable truth. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Crescent Meadows, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered under the soft glow of the setting sun. A large banner reading, "Unity, Freedom, and Environmental Justice," was unfurled between towering oaks, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate the triumph of our rights over exploitation, a victory for every homeowner and every steward of the land in our community, Councilwoman Rodriguez proclaimed, her voice resonating with conviction. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our shared commitment to protecting our natural resources and our individual freedoms. As each new day dawned over Crescent Meadows, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how the HOA's illegal drilling on my land was met with my resolute counterattack, and how I cemented every last drill hole shut, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that our land is sacred and that our property rights must never be compromised. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Crescent Meadows, truth, justice, and the right to protect our resources would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Crescent Meadows would forever be a place where creativity, environmental integrity, and respect for individual property were cherished above all else.